Welcome back to the NFLandU Podcast on this October 23rd Wednesday. First Wednesday show we've ever done. Probably won't be the last. We've got a pretty fun show planned. I actually had a blast planning the show. Who knew that writing out and producing bits would be so much fun? But it's the Trade Extravaganza show. We are less than a week away from the NFL trade deadline on Tuesday, October 29th. And we've already had a surprising amount of trades, to be honest with you, especially on Tuesday. Emmanuel Sanders got traded. Quandre Diggs got traded from the Lions. That was a shocker, to be honest with you. Yeah, just ask the Lions players. That was a stunning trade when he got sent to the Seahawks. Kerryon Conley got traded from the Raiders to the Texans. We didn't talk about that on Tuesday, even though I wrote it down. You know, we've had a fair amount of trades happen so far, you know, just this week, let alone this trade cycle. And I think it's only going to increase more as we get closer to the deadline on Tuesday. I've always subscribed to the notion that Cowboys owner Jerry Jones has had that deadlines make deals. And, well, the closer we get to the deadline, I think we're going to see more deals. So here's how we're going to do this. It's going to be a much shorter show than we normally do. We're first going to talk about 5 teams that should be trying to trade away players. And then we're going to talk about 5 teams that should be trying to make a move to trade for players. And then we're going to talk about 5 realistic trade scenarios that could actually happen by Tuesday. That's going to be the 3 things we talk about, and we're just going to have a little fun. Spend a little time talking about teams and trades. Everybody loves trades. If you don't like trade, you're un-American. Boom. Gotcha. So let's start by talking about 5 teams that should be trying to trade away players. Now, normally the teams that are trying to trade away players are teams that realize they're not doing anything this season. You know, normally this is associated with teams that are having a, quote, fire sale on talent because, you know, they're not good. And the number 1 team on my list, if you didn't already know this because they've been a punching bag the entire history of this podcast, the Miami Dolphins. Oh, if you haven't been paying attention to the Dolphins, you should know that they've been selling talent since well back into the offseason. They got rid of Laramie Tunsil, they got rid of Minkah Fitzpatrick, and now they're apparently shopping around Kenyon Drake. And you know, why stop there? Why stop at just getting rid of Kenyon Drake? Why not also shop Devontae Parker while you're at it? Miami's going full tilt into this idea that they're going to tank and acquire talent through the draft, like the Cleveland Browns did the last couple of years. And it worked for Cleveland. They got a bunch of talent. You know, it's not all working together right now, but that's a different issue. They got the talent. There's no question about that, and Miami wants that. So why not just sell off basically every single asset? You've already basically sold your soul, and you're not being a competitive team, and everybody has come to terms with that. You're already a laughingstock, so why not just, you know, ensure that you're getting the number 1 overall draft pick? Sell off Kenyon Drake, Devontae Parker, go full tilt into this tank. So you can get your number 1 quarterback in April and maybe a couple more. You're going to get another first-round pick because you have the Steelers pick, so go full tilt into the tank. I respect tanking. Everybody thinks it's a dirty word. I don't think it's a dirty word. You know, go full tilt, Miami. Go full tilt. Just start trading players left and right. Get them draft picks. All right, so the Dolphins are the number 1 team that should be trading right now. The number 2 team is another winless team, the Cincinnati Bengals, the 0-7 woeless Bengals. And they're about to come up on a reckoning here towards this offseason. It feels like a lot of the talent that's currently on this team probably won't be there, including quarterback Andy Dalton. And I'm just saying, if you're going to blow it up in the offseason, which it feels like that's where this team is heading, and you're going to probably just purge a lot of the talent, your season's already foregone. You're going to be a horrific team this year. Why not just, you know, try and acquire some draft capital? I'm serious. Like, you know, trade Andy Dalton. He's probably not going to be their quarterback in 2020. So trade him right now. I think his market is at its highest right now before, you know, the quarterback market gets flooded this offseason with guys getting cut and the guys coming out in the draft. You know, his market is at its highest right now. So Call up, I mentioned this on Tuesday's podcast yesterday. Call up Chicago and say, we'll give you Andy Dalton. Tell us what you'll give us for him. Because Mitch Trubisky is not a good quarterback. And the sooner the Bears realize that, the better. I said Chicago should offer a third and a fifth for Andy Dalton. And yes, that is overpaying for him. But you want to ensure that the Bengals say yes to your trade. Because the Bears should not be worried about their draft capital. Your team is loaded. The only thing it's missing is a freaking quarterback. And a run game, but that's a different issue. So the Bengals are another winless team that, their season is kaput. So why not start selling assets, is what I'm saying. Commit to the rebuild. The third team on this list is a team that's already been active in the trade market, the Atlanta Falcons, the 1-6 Falcons. They traded Emmanuel Sanders yesterday. There's been talk that, Vic Beasley, their linebacker, could also be on the trade market. This Falcons team is just spiraling downward into a pit of despair, and, their Super Bowl window is closed completely now. I think we can all agree to that. It's incredible that in a 3-year, what was it, like a 3 to 4 year span, they went from a team that was had an MVP level quarterback and was literally within 15 minutes of winning their first Super Bowl, and to go from that to a wild card team that wins a playoff game to a team that's just an absolute joke right now and one of the worst in the entire league is something truly to behold. If they're getting rid of Mohamed Sanu, I think that's a sign of things to come, that they're also going to be a team that blows it up this offseason. They won't get rid of Matt Ryan. They won't get rid of Calvin Ridley or Julio. And they also shouldn't get rid of Austin Hooper, their tight end, who's arguably having an incredible season. But everything else, I think, especially in their defense, could be, at risk to get going. Even their running backs, Devontae Freeman and Ito Smith, I think could also be moved. I think this Atlanta Falcons organization is about to go through a full-scale reboot, including getting rid of their general manager, Thomas Dimitroff. And listen, if you're going to bite the bullet this offseason and get rid of everything, why not go ahead and start? Start getting rid of players, start acquiring talent so that the next head coach that comes in and GM can come in and they have something to build with. Is what I'm arguing. I hate teams that always put off biting the bullet on something. Just go ahead and do it. I mean, yeah, it's going to be awkward for the rest of the season, but you're a team that's probably only going to win 2 to 3 games this year. Go ahead and do it. It's not that hard. My fourth team that I think should be selling assets, but I think is too stubborn to sell assets, is the Washington football team. Now, their general manager, I'm forgetting his name right now, but it doesn't matter what his name is. He's a yes guy for their owner, Dan Snyder, who speaks for Dan Snyder. So basically, Dan Snyder believes that this team has talent to be competitive and to win now. And while they do technically have talent, in my opinion, they aren't a win-now team, as their 1-6 record would show you. And if you listened to the end of our podcast yesterday, you would remember that I picked the Vikings to win Thursday night. If the Vikings win Thursday night, the Washington football team will be 1-7 at the trade deadline. So what I'm saying is you have some talent that teams might be interested, especially on defense with Josh Norman and not Josh Landry. I'm forgetting names. You got talent on the defensive line as well. I'm just saying you have some talent that teams might be interested in, including, hey, you can go as far as selling Case Keenum too. But the main prize on their roster that they don't seem to want to sell is Trent Williams, even though he has stated admittedly he does not want to play for the Washington football team, their star left tackle, because he doesn't trust the organization or their doctors, their trainers, and all that stuff. He doesn't trust them. That bridge has been burned. It is nothing to do with money, and he stated emphatically that he does not want to play for Washington. So why they refuse to trade him is beyond me. They apparently want to wait till the offseason to even think about trading him, which is even stupider because at that point the left tackle market will become more bountiful as guys are getting cut by teams and guys are coming out in the draft. It will be easier to find a left tackle in the offseason than it is right now. The Washington football team can literally control the market and ask for anything because Trent Williams can come in and start at left tackle for almost any team in the league. Now, granted, he's a bit older and he has injury issues. I don't think that matters right now when you're a team that's desperate to protect your quarterback like a team like Cleveland could be. And that's a little hint of what we're going to predict about later for our 5 realistic trade scenarios. But Washington has assets. It's just I don't know if they're going to be... I'm going to use the word smart because I think it's stupid that they're going to sit here and be stubborn about this because Dan Snyder thinks they can be a win-now team. They're not. You're 1-6, dude. Come to terms with that. You're looking down another 4-win season for what feels like the 12th time in the last 20 years. Reboot this entire thing. And my last team, the number 5 team that I think should be trading assets right now and that has already started to trade assets right now, the Denver Broncos, the 2-5 Broncos. Now, you rewind the clock back a couple weeks when the Broncos were like 0-4, and people were talking, Denver could be a team that could be a fire sale candidate at the trade deadline if they're still winless by then. Well, then they rack off 2 straight wins, and everybody's like, you know what, maybe the Broncos aren't going to be trading a bunch of their talent. And then they lose horrifically to Kansas City. Now they're back to 2-5, and they traded Emmanuel Sanders, so I think that tells you all you need to know. Now, has Courtland Sutton stepped up, the Broncos wide receiver, and kind of taken the number 1 job from Emmanuel? I think so. But still losing Emmanuel Sanders, a veteran presence in that locker room, is a tough blow for a Denver Broncos organization. And I don't think it'll be the last. There was a lot of talk a couple weeks ago, would this team trade Von Miller? I don't think they'll trade Von Miller, but I think there's another player on that defense that's going to get traded at this trade deadline. And I think the Broncos are going to go into this offseason not knowing where their direction is. They've been directionless since, they won the Super Bowl years ago. They have no identity on offense. They have a lackluster identity on defense. And who knows what this team wants to do? Who knows? But I think a couple defenders on that defense are probably going to be moving. I think the Broncos have realized their season's not going to be very good. And they did this last season. I don't remember who they traded towards the trade deadline last season, but it was the same exact story. They realized their season isn't going to be good, so they started trading assets. So those are 5 teams I think that should be trading away players, usually the bottom of the barrel. Now we're going to move on to 5 teams that should be trying to make a move before the trade deadline or at the deadline. Now these are teams that are usually winning or right around winning or a fringe candidate that feels like they just need one piece to kind of make everything work. So I'm going to start with a bit of a surprise candidate. The number 5 team that I think should be trading to try and get some help. The 2-4 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hear me out on this one. A couple weeks ago, Tampa Bay was riding high with Jameis Winston, and they felt like they didn't have a single problem in the world. And Jameis stunk up the bed, turned the ball over 6 times in London, and they had their bye week after that, so we haven't heard anything since. What I'm saying is, your defense, specifically in the secondary, isn't good. Bruce Arians, their head coach, even called their secondary soft at one point after the New Orleans game. So why not go out and try and trade for a corner? Go and get a plug-and-play guy, maybe like a... I know there's apparently a fair amount of corners available in the open market that could be traded. So why not go get a plug-and-play guy and try and boost your defense a little bit? Because the Buccaneers think they can still win games. And if Jameis Winston gets hot again for a couple games, maybe they could. Who knows? But that's a little surprise candidate that I think could make a play at the trade deadline for a player. I just don't see them as a seller, is what I'm trying to get. I think, if anything, Tampa Bay might be a buyer at the trade deadline. I don't see them being a seller. My number 4 team, Cleveland. 2-4 Cleveland. And all I have written in my notes here is, for the love of God, get Baker some offensive line help. should be the sole focus of the Cleveland Browns right now, getting Baker some offensive line help. And I've been saying it for weeks, try and get Trenton Williams for Washington. I tweeted it out weeks ago. And apparently Cleveland GM John Dorsey has been calling Washington once a week since the start of the season to try and get them to agree to a deal, and they just refuse to do anything about it, which is beyond stupid, in my opinion. But Cleveland needs to find at least one offensive lineman at this trade deadline. If it's not left tackle Trent Williams, find somebody to come in and protect Baker. My next team up, another little surprise one, but it was a team a couple of people were talking about like a week or two ago. The 6-1 Green Bay Packers, I think, should make a move at the trade deadline. Here's why. I think they could use one more wide receiver. I am not confident with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison and Jimmy Graham, who's like 1/6 of the player he was. I think if they could go out and get they don't have to go out and get a stud wide receiver. I'm not saying that. But, going out and get like another B+ wide receiver, I think could really go a long way. We don't know how much longer Devontae Adams, their number one wide receiver, will be out. He's got turf toe. He's had it for a couple weeks. And turf toe is an injury that tends to linger with some players. So he could be out for even a couple more weeks. And I'm just saying, I think that if they got one more wide receiver that could go out and make plays, I think I would feel even more confident in saying that the Green Bay Packers are a legitimate threat in the NFC. I think if they go out and make a move, I think it could solidify their Super Bowl chances. Just like the 49ers did. The 49ers went out and got Emmanuel Sanders, and now I'm literally on board with them crushing the rest of the NFC. Because now they have a playmaker in the wide receiver room that they haven't had probably since Michael Crabtree was in his prime there in 2012, 2011. Emmanuel Sanders is going to be the best player that San Francisco has had in like 8 years in the wide receiver room. So Green Bay doesn't have to go out and get an Emmanuel Sanders type, but they can go out and get like another number 2 wide receiver, and I think he can come in and be better than Marquez Valdez-Scantling, is what I'm getting at. I think if they go out and get another wide receiver, I think it could really energize their Super Bowl chances. That's all I'm saying. The number 2 team on my list for teams that could be active at the trade deadline and making plays, the Seattle Seahawks, the 5-2 Seahawks. And I have just like the Packers, I have a specific position that they're going to target. And Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network reported on this a week ago. Tight end. The Seahawks really need a tight end. After their starting tight end, Will Dissly, who was having a heck of a year, tore his Achilles a week or two ago. They were running out a bunch of no-name guys to play tight end last week. And, Will Dissly was a threat in their passing game, and now they don't have a threat in the passing game. So keep an eye on them for going out and getting a guy that can come in, that can plug in and be their starter. I don't think they're going to go out and get they're not going to do anything crazy like flip a first-round draft pick for like O.J. Howard or anything. I'm not saying do anything that crazy. Even though I bet they could probably get him. I'm just saying. I don't think Bruce Arians likes O.J. Howard. But I think that the Seahawks could really use a tight end, and they're trying to keep pace with the 49ers. So go out and, maybe flip a third or fourth to a team, get their tight end, come in and plug him in, and you have your passing tight end back. Get a guy that can, that can do little stop and goes or just stop routes that goes 5 yards and then stops and catches the ball for Russell Wilson. Just a nice little check down for Russell. He doesn't have to be a playmaking dynamic tight end. You probably won't get that, and teams aren't willing to trade those away. I'm just saying to keep an eye on the Seahawks for tight end help at the trade deadline. And my number 1 team that should be making a move at the trade deadline is a team that just came off a horrific loss Sunday, the 3-4 Philadelphia Eagles. Keep an eye on this team for making a move to try and get some defensive help with everybody hurt. Linebacker, corner, You name it, this team might make a move for defensive help, and they could really need it. Get a new guy in there, maybe even a couple new guys, and just energize the whole freaking thing. So those are 5 teams that I think could be active at the trade deadline. I know the Patriots are probably going to be active at the trade deadline. They might even go get another wide receiver. Who knows? They could also maybe go get a new tight end. Who knows? I just felt like that was too safe of a one to throw out there because they're always active at the trade deadline. So we just went through 5 teams that should be trading away players and 5 teams that should be trading for players. Now comes the really fun part. 5 trades that could realistically happen by the trade deadline. And I'm going to start with one that we just talked about. The number 1 trade I think could happen. I say the Denver Broncos send cornerback Chris Harris, who is in the final year of his contract, to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 3rd-round draft pick. Eagles desperately need corner help. This is a trade that has been talked, well, not this specific trade, but Chris Harris has been talked about as a trade candidate for weeks now with the Broncos, with what feels like since dating back to the start of the season. And it just makes way too much sense to, send him to a team that is desperate for corner help. He's in the final year of his deal, so Philly doesn't really have to pay him a whole bunch of money. And Philadelphia is only 1 game back from the NFC East lead right now, so push all your chips to the middle of the table and try to go get some help. So I think Chris Harris is going to be traded, and I just think that the number 1 candidate would be the Philadelphia Eagles. It just makes all the sense in the world. And maybe the 3rd-round pick is a little too high for Chris Williams. Maybe he might even go for a 4th-round pick because he's in the final year of his deal. But he could come in and be an immediate starter for the Eagles secondary, and he's probably a vast improvement over whatever they have right now. Because what they have is a bunch of no-name guys because their other guys are hurt. So Denver sends cornerback Chris Harris to the Eagles for a 3rd-round pick. 1 trade that could happen. My number 2 trade that could happen, I've been harping on this entire show so far. Washington sends left tackle Trent Williams to Cleveland for a 1st and a 4th-round draft pick. Now you're saying, that is a lot of compensation to give up. And I must remind you that Laramie Tunsil, the Dolphins left tackle, went for 2 first-round picks right before the season started. So a 1st and a 4th for a guy that can come in, be a plug-and-play left tackle and start immediately for a team, I think it's fair. I think it's fair. Now, we've talked about how stubborn Washington is, and I don't know if Trent Williams will get traded or not. He should absolutely be traded. There is no point in keeping him on your roster right now. But, just in case he doesn't get traded, I have a backup plan. For Cleveland. So, you can also count this as the number 2 trade, because one of these trades is going to happen. Cleveland is about to get an offensive lineman, whether it be the left tackle or this next guy I talk about, another disgruntled offensive lineman from a team. I say if Cleveland can't land Trent Williams, okay, then they call up the New York Jets and say, hey, we'll give you a 5th-round draft pick for Kelechi Osemele, your guard. Now, Kelechi Osemele is apparently in a major dispute with the Jets organization about their trainers and whether he should be playing right now or not. It's a whole can of worms to get into right now. What I'm saying is Kelechi probably wants a fresh start. The Jets probably want a fresh start. So in swoops the Browns, say, hey, we'll give you a 5th-round draft pick for him, and he can come in and be an automatic improvement over what they have on the offensive line. So either the Browns are able to finally break through with the Washington football team on Trent Williams, or they turn around to the Jets and say, we'll give you a 5th for Kelechi Osemele. I think one of those 2 things will happen by Tuesday. And I think the odds of it go up even higher if Washington gets absolutely dunked on this Thursday night. I think if they're 1-7 and they're embarrassed like 35-7, I think the odds of Trent Williams being traded go up just a little bit more. I don't know why they want to hold on to him and wait till this offseason to think about dealing him. That makes no sense. His value is at its highest right now. Right now. Washington literally can control the left tackle market and ask for whatever they want, because the market is bone dry right now for starting left tackles. But they're going to be stubborn about it. So either Cleveland lands Kelechi Osemele from the Jets, or they break through with Trent Williams. That's my number 2 scenario. I know it was 2-1, but I wrote down Trent Williams last night and I was like, maybe it won't happen. So I threw in a little caveat with Kelechi Osemele. Yeah, how about that deep dive? Yeah. So that's that. My number 3 trade that could happen is one that kind of came to fruition within the last 24 hours. So the Lions were active yesterday in trading Quandre Diggs to the Seahawks. It was Quandre Diggs and a 7th-round draft pick to the Seahawks for a 5th-round draft pick. And I don't think the Lions are going to be done, especially since their starting running back, Kerryon Johnson, got placed on injured reserve yesterday morning in a bit of news that really went under the radar with the trades that happened. So here's what I say. I say the Lions, sensing that they need running back help, call up the Dolphins and say, hey, we'll give you a 5th-round draft pick for Kenyon Drake, your running back that you've been shopping for the better part of a couple months. Now, I don't know what the asking price is for Kenyon Drake. He's in the last year of his contract, so it can't be too high. But he could come in and be a plug-and-play running back for the Lions. I think he's better than Kerryon Johnson. I'm going to be honest about it. And you know what? If Kerryon Johnson comes back in week 15, if I'm doing my math correctly, they can be a 1-2 punch combo for like a week or two. And you know what? Maybe Kenyon Drake could come in and provide the spark in the running game that's been missing for the Lions outside of the one game versus the Chiefs. I think the Lions are right there in the NFC North. They just need to know how to finish, and maybe go getting a bell cow like Kenyon Drake, who once again is in his last year, so you don't have to pay him a bunch of money, and you can split with him at the end of the season. You just need some help for like 8 weeks, and Kenyon Drake can be that help. Once again, I don't know what the Dolphins' asking price is for Kenyon Drake, but it can't be too high. It can't be. So yeah, maybe a 5th-round pick, and if they ask for something more, give them a 4th-round pick. 4th or 5th-round pick for Kenyon Drake, I think that's fair. So, Miami sends Kenyon Drake to the Lions for a 4th or 5th-round pick. One of those. So, that's my 3rd scenario. My 4th scenario has 2 teams we haven't talked about yet. I say the New York Football Giants send cornerback Janoris Jackrabbit Jenkins to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 5th-round pick. Yeah. Like I said, the market at the trade deadline might be flooded with corners, and I think Janoris could be one to go. The Giants' defense is awful. They're 2-5. I think they've come to terms with the fact that they're going to be an up-and-down team all year. And why not trade Janoris Jenkins to a team that could actually use him? Be a plug-and-play guy, especially since Jalen Ramsey is gone from the Jags now. And, Janoris could literally come in and be the new Jalen Ramsey. He's a guy who likes to talk. He's got a lot of energy. And, maybe he has lost a step, but I think the Jags defense could really use some help. So, maybe they go and get Janoris Jenkins or another corner at this time. Who knows? They could go get Chris Harris as well. I just think that maybe Janoris Jackrabbit Jenkins for like a 5th or hell, even a 6th-round draft pick. I think that sounds fair. Just try and, build some draft capital for the Giants. So, Jags trade a 5th or 6th-round draft pick to the Giants for Janoris Jenkins. Jenkins comes in and can fill a void in their secondary that they kind of need. And maybe the Jags defense gets a little better after that. All right, last but not least, I was going back and forth on this one because I just couldn't quite figure out a trade scenario that could work. But I finally found one that I feel like is realistic enough that could actually happen for these two teams. I say the Seattle Seahawks call up the Cincinnati Bengals and they say, hey, we will give you this nice and tasty third-round draft pick. Oh, yeah, third-round draft pick. And you send us Tyler Eifert, your tight end. Cincinnati goes full in on the rebuild. They start getting rid of their starters and Tyler Eifert. And yeah, he's got a bunch of injury histories, but when he's been healthy and has had good quarterback play, he has been an absolute threat. The problem is that he's always hurt. So maybe not a third-round pick, maybe even a fourth, or maybe even less than that. But he can come in and, be a guy that can provide stability to the Seattle Seahawks tight end position, because that way they don't have to run in 5 different guys at tight end throughout an entire game. And he can go out and catch some patches from Russell Wilson. I think Tyler Eifert can be a dynamic threat when he's healthy. The problem is he's almost never healthy. But I think the Bengals and the Seahawks, Tyler Eifert for anywhere from a 3rd to maybe even 6th round draft pick makes a lot of sense. I wanted to say the Seahawks trade for O.J. Howard for like a 1st and a 5th. Or maybe even a 1st and a 6th round draft pick. But I've gone back and forth on seeing O.J. Howard traded at the trade deadline. I don't think Bruce Arians likes O.J. Howard, but I just don't see him trading him. So, those are 5 realistic trade scenarios, technically 6, but the 2 offensive linemen count as 1. 5 realistic trade scenarios that could happen by the trade deadline this Tuesday. So we'll keep an eye on it. We still got a lot of football to be played. I think things are going to die down a bit as we get closer to the weekend. By that I mean once teams are settling into their game plans. They're not focused on any trades right now. So I think look for Monday and Tuesday to be big days for trades. Is what I'm going to predict. I don't think maybe we get one today, maybe. But that's going to be hard because a player would have to come in and try to learn an entire system in like 2 days before a game. Well, I'm just arguing that after this Sunday and Monday, we'll see where teams are standing after 8 weeks, which will be the halfway point of the season, and they'll know whether they need to make a trade or not. Some teams might be stubborn, some might not. We'll see. But that's our trade extravaganza show. I knew we were going to go short, and we did. That was the intention. The next time you hear from me, it will be Friday. We'll recap the Vikings game on Thursday night, the Vikings-Washington game, and preview the rest of Week 8. We're almost at the halfway point, people. Time sure does fly. So thanks for stopping by, and thanks for having fun on this trade extravaganza show. And I guess I'll see you guys Friday. Bye.